My family always made me babysit their kids every Christmas while they celebrated and had fun. But last year, something inside me snapped. I'd had enough. Evil big sister threatened to punish me by refusing to pay for my college. Well, I refused to back down. I stopped contacting them entirely. My name's Ruby, and let me tell you, coming into this world, I was always an afterthought. 12 years after my eldest sister, Sarah, and 10 years after Emma, I was a surprise, the unexpected one. By the time I could remember anything, they were deep into their teenage years, obsessed with boys and makeup, completely uninterested in a baby sister. Our house in suburban Minnesota was a constant reminder of how much pride my parents took in their older daughters. Sarah was the golden child, with straight A's that made my parents beam with pride at the dinner table. Emma? She was the cheerleader, always in the spotlight, her achievements announced to anyone who would listen. And me? I sat there, pushing peas around my plate, feeling like a ghost in my own home. Always unnoticed. I remember the first time Sarah brought home her boyfriend. I was just 4, hiding behind the banister, watching this tall, spiky-haired guy nervously shake hands with our dad. Emma started dating at 15, and suddenly, they were everything I wasn't. Beautiful. Confident. Popular. It was like they had it all figured out while I was just there. Ruby, finish your homework, my mom would say, barely glancing at me while she helped Sarah pick out prom dresses or discuss college applications with Emma. I learned early that I had to be self-sufficient. I couldn't rely on attention from my parents because it was always on my sisters. Did you hear? My mom burst into the kitchen one morning when I was 7. Sarah got accepted to Northwestern. The news was followed by a breakfast of celebratory pancakes, while I sat in my usual spot, silent, invisible. When Emma left for college, the house felt empty, yet somehow, it was still filled with their presence. Their rooms, like shrines to their past, held trophies, photos, and memories, untouched. Meanwhile, I tried to carve out my own space in the silence, learning to find comfort in solitude, trying not to mind that every conversation somehow always circled back to my incredible older sisters. The real turning point came when I was 15. Sarah, now married and living just across town, had a baby. A boy named Tyler. I'll never forget the day she brought him home from the hospital. Everyone was crying, my parents practically floating with joy at the thought of becoming grandparents. "You'll be such a wonderful aunt," my mom said, squeezing my shoulder. Looking back now, I can see that was the moment everything started to change. At first, I was excited about being an aunt. Tyler was adorable, and I loved making him laugh, playing silly games while Sarah and Mom chatted over coffee. But that innocence didn't last long. It all shifted when Sarah asked me one Saturday morning, "Ruby, could you watch Tyler for a couple hours? I really need to do some shopping." Before I could even respond, she handed me Tyler and was out the door. "Thanks, sis. You're the best." That became the new routine. Every weekend, Sarah would drop Tyler off, disappear for hours, sometimes for shopping, sometimes for lunch with friends, or a spa day. All under the guise of needing a break from motherhood. "It's not fair," I complained to Mom one day after Sarah had been gone for hours. "I had plans to meet Jenny at the mall today." But Mom barely looked up from her magazine. "Family helps family, Ruby. Your sister needs this time to herself. You'll understand when you're a mother." At 16, Emma announced she was pregnant. "It's a girl," she squealed at dinner while everyone celebrated. I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. Sure enough, when little Sophie was born, the pattern repeated. My weekends turned into a circus of managing a toddler and a newborn. Helping Tyler build block towers while trying to calm Sophie's crying, it wasn't as fun as it sounds. And homework? Forget it, only if they were both napping at the same time, which was rare. One Saturday, I told Dad, Jason asked me to the movies tonight. I was bouncing Sophie on my hip while watching Tyler color on our coffee table instead of his coloring book. His response? You should have thought about that before agreeing to watch the kids. I never agreed. I protested. Nobody ever asks me. The frustration in my voice made Sophie cry. Lower your voice. You're upsetting the baby. Mom scolded from the kitchen. Stop being selfish. Your sisters need your support. So, I started spending my free time in the school library, researching colleges, not just any colleges, but ones far, far away from home. Every A on my report card felt like a step closer to freedom. When I got my acceptance letter from Berkeley, including a partial scholarship, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I could see a future beyond the chaos. But, of course, my family had other plans. Community college here has a great business program, Sarah suggested during what they called a family council, though I called it an intervention. You could live at home and save money, and help with the kids. Emma added brightly. I looked around at their expectant faces, Mom, Dad, Sarah, Emma, even Grandma Rose, who had been unusually quiet throughout. Then Grandma's voice cut through the tension, sharp and clear. I think Berkeley is perfect for Ruby. Everyone turned to stare at her. That program is exactly what she needs for her future career. And your grandfather's education fund will cover what the scholarship doesn't. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I could have hugged Grandma right then and there. The family council ended with disappointed looks from my parents and sisters, but I didn't care. I could finally see a future that was mine, one where I wasn't just a free babysitter. College was everything I had dreamed of and more. My dorm became my sanctuary. My classmates? Real friends. For the first time in years, my weekends were my own, no crying babies, no sticky toddlers, just me and my choices. But family obligations? They don't disappear. Thanksgiving and Christmas were non-negotiable. Mom would call weeks in advance, her voice thick with expectation. Everyone's asking about you, Ruby. The kids miss their aunt. That first Christmas after I started college? It was chaos. Sarah had 2 boys now, Tyler and baby Luke. Emma had Max along with Sophie. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Ruby! Aunt Janet called out as soon as I stepped through the door. The kids have been asking about you. Before I could protest, Cousin Rachel's 7-year-old daughter attached herself to my leg, followed by Cousin Mike's 9-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter. Ruby, honey, Mom called from the kitchen, barely visible behind a mountain of dirty dishes. Take the kids upstairs to your room. I'll bring some snacks up later. And just like that, I was in charge of 8 kids, upstairs. My old bedroom turned into a war zone. Toys scattered everywhere, juice spills on my childhood bedspread, crayon marks mysteriously appearing on the walls. When Mom finally appeared with snacks, she barely made eye contact. By the time I sneaked downstairs, at 8 p.m., after corralling the kids and coordinating with various parents to pick them up, the dining room was empty, except for dirty dishes and the aftermath of a holiday meal I'd never gotten to enjoy. Ruby, be a dear and help me with the dishes, Mom called, as if I hadn't just spent the entire day doing her a massive favor. I looked at the mountain of plates and serving dishes, evidence of a meal I didn't get to partake in. And you know what? That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. Finals week was finally winding down. Just as I was finishing my last paper of the semester, my phone buzzed with the familiar ping of a message from Mom. It was her usual pre-holiday update, but this time, something about it made my blood run cold. Sarah and Emma are coming with the kids, it read cheerfully, as if it were good news. Plus Janet and her twins, Rachel's girls, Mike's kids, and exciting news, Sarah's sister-in-law Lisa is joining us with her 3. It'll be such a wonderful Christmas with all the little ones. I did the math in my head. 12 kids. 12. I sat there in the library, staring at my phone, as if the numbers might change. Then, I did the unthinkable. I turned the screen off, and back on again. But no, the message was still there, clear as day. Something inside me shifted, a heavy weight settling on my chest. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't just a kid in the family anymore. I was an adult, and I was done. 2 years of college had given me perspective, real perspective. I'd listened to my roommate Kate talk about her holidays, about sitting around the dinner table playing board games and watching movies with her family, about proper Christmas dinners. Meanwhile, I had spent every holiday of my adult life as an unpaid nanny. I didn't even reply to Mom's message. Instead, I packed my bag for Christmas break with an unusual sense of calm. For the first time, I wasn't dreading the holidays. This time, I was going home with a plan. The days leading up to Christmas were deceptively normal. I helped Mom in the kitchen, breathing in the familiar smells of her signature dishes, pot roast, honey-glazed ham, and her famous apple pie. I decorated the Christmas tree, carefully hanging the ornaments I'd made back in elementary school, alongside the fancy glass balls Mom reserved for the front of the tree. Everything felt comforting, like nothing had changed. But I knew it had. Then, Christmas Day arrived. The calm before the storm. The cars started pulling into the driveway, one after another, each bringing more chaos than the last. Sarah arrived first with her boys, now 5 and 3, followed by Emma with Sophie and Max. Lisa, Sarah's sister-in-law, showed up with her 3 kids, all under 7. And then the rest of the relatives poured in, each family adding more children to the ever-growing crowd. I watched from the corner of the living room as the noise level steadily rose. Sarah made her way toward me, her youngest balanced on her hip while the older one tugged at her sleeve. "Ruby," she called out, her voice the same familiar tone that always signaled she was about to pass off her parental duties. "The boys have been so excited to see you. They can't wait to play with their favorite aunt." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't budge. I stood my ground, locking eyes with her. "No," I said, my voice steady, despite my heart hammering in my chest. "I'm not watching the kids today. I'm here to enjoy Christmas, like everyone else." The room didn't fall silent. There were too many children for that, but I could feel the ripple of shock move through the adults. Sarah's mouth dropped open, Mom froze in the doorway with a plate of cookies, and Dad looked up from his newspaper, eyebrows raised. "But who's going to watch all the kids?" Emma's panicked voice carried across the living room as I turned toward the stairs. I glanced back just long enough to see Mom's helpless shrug and the bewildered looks on their faces. The sight almost made me laugh, like I'd just told them Christmas was canceled. My feet carried me up the familiar stairs, past the family photos marking my sister's many achievements, and into my childhood bedroom. The soft click of the door closing behind me felt like the period at the end of a very long sentence. I flopped onto my bed, the same twin bed I'd had since middle school, and let out a long breath. Downstairs, the chaos continued, muffled sounds of adult voices rising and falling, children crying, the occasional thump of something being dropped or thrown. "Can you believe her? So selfish." The fragments of conversation that filtered up through the floor made me smile. Let them talk. Let them finally face the reality of parenting their own kids. My phone buzzed with a message from Kate. "Did you do it?" Did you finally stand up to them? She asked. Operation Freedom is in progress, I type back. Currently hiding in my room while they figure out how to parent their own kids. A knock on my door interrupted my texting. Ruby, the children are asking for you, Mom's voice called, trying to sound concerned but landing somewhere between annoyed and desperate. I'm busy, Mom, I muttered, not moving from my comfortable position on the bed. Her sigh echoed through the door, followed by the sound of her footsteps retreating down the hallway. I returned to my phone, joining a group chat with my college friends, who were providing running commentary on their own family Christmas dramas. Jessica's uncle was drunk again. Mike's grandma was asking when he'd find a nice girl. Kate's brother had brought home a surprise girlfriend. 2 hours passed like this, in peaceful rebellion. My phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from friends who'd heard me complain about holiday babysitting duty for years. Meanwhile, downstairs, the chaos slowly settled into a different rhythm, one that didn't include my participation. When I finally descended the stairs for dinner, you would have thought I had risen from the dead, judging by the looks on their faces. Aunt Janet actually dropped her fork. Cousin Rachel's mouth hung open mid-sentence. I scanned the dining room, noting Emma's conspicuous absence. Through the doorway to the living room, I could see her, looking like she'd been through a war, her usually perfect hair coming loose from its elegant updo, a stain of unknown origin on her festive sweater. I took my seat at the adult table, a first in recent memory, and surveyed the spread before me. Everything was still hot, still fresh, still waiting to be enjoyed. No lukewarm leftovers. No picked-over remnants. No half-eaten children's portions. As I filled my plate with Mom's honey-glazed ham, Aunt Janet's sweet potato casserole, and Cousin Rachel's famous green bean dish, I could feel the weight of disapproving stares. The clinking of silverware against plates couldn't quite mask the tension in the room. I was halfway through my first proper holiday meal in years when Sarah finally snapped. She had been watching me eat with the kind of intensity usually reserved for nature documentaries about predators and prey. Well, she finally announced, her voice dripping with sarcasm, looks like someone's gotten a little too big for their boots at college. Seems they've forgotten all about sisterly duties. I took my time with my spoonful of mashed potatoes, deliberately licking the spoon clean before responding. The food really was excellent when you got to eat it fresh. Funny thing about sisterly duties, I replied, keeping my voice level and calm. I don't remember seeing free babysitter in any sisterhood manual. Maybe you could point that chapter out to me right after the part where parents are supposed to watch their own children. The gasps around the table would have been comical if they weren't so genuine. Aunt Janet actually clutched her pearls. I hadn't known people really did that outside of movies. Cousin Rachel became suddenly very interested in her green beans, while Uncle Mike seemed to be trying to disappear into his dinner roll. Mom and Dad exchanged that special look they had, the one that meant they were disappointed but didn't want to cause a scene. Dad's fork was frozen halfway to his mouth, and Mom's smile had gone tight around the edges. But instead of the lecture I was expecting, Mom cleared her throat and asked Uncle Mike about his new job. The conversation stuttered back to life, though everyone kept shooting glances my way, as if expecting me to sprout a second head. I just kept eating, savoring every bite of food that hadn't been picked over by tiny hands or gone cold while I changed diapers. About 20 minutes into dinner, Emma appeared in the doorway looking like she'd been through a war. Her Christmas sweater now sported what looked like juice stains, in addition to the earlier unknown substance, and her hair had completely escaped its updo. "Sarah," she called, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. Sarah shot me one last withering look. Before pushing back from the table, the sisters exchanged glances. Emma practically collapsed into the vacated chair, looking utterly drained, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that seems to settle into your bones after years of neglect. It was a weariness I knew all too well, the kind I'd felt every holiday for as long as I could remember. She filled her plate mechanically, her movements stiff and robotic, but despite her focus on food, I could feel her glaring at me between each bite. Her eyes burned with something I couldn't quite place. Was it anger? Frustration? Disappointment? I met her gaze, raised an eyebrow, and shrugged. Then I went back to savoring my dinner, not a care in the world. After finishing 2 servings of Mom's legendary apple pie, a luxury I'd never allowed myself to enjoy before, I quietly excused myself from the table. There were no protests, no last-minute pleas to help clean up. No one asked me to take a shift with the kids. The house was quiet, still, as if I were a ghost slipping away unnoticed. I descended the stairs the next morning, feeling the rush of peace that came from the night before. That feeling evaporated the instant I stepped into the living room. The sunlight filtering through the windows seemed so out of place compared to the storm waiting for me. There they were, Mom, Dad, Sarah, and Emma, sitting in an obvious ambush formation. It hit me in a wave of realization. This was it. They'd been planning this moment all along. Sarah didn't waste a second. She launched straight into it. What kind of performance was that yesterday? Her voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp and bitter. You made us look like terrible parents in front of everyone. I sank into the armchair, surprisingly calm, my heart still steady. Performance? I repeated, a small chuckle escaping me despite the tension. You mean me finally wanting to enjoy Christmas, like everyone else? I'm just tired of being the unpaid, unappreciated babysitter while everyone else gets to actually have a holiday. Is that so hard to understand? Mom's brow furrowed, her confusion almost palpable. But you never complained before, she interjected, almost pleading. I laughed. This time, it wasn't funny. Never complained? I've been complaining for years, Mom, but it was just too convenient to ignore, wasn't it? Too easy to keep using the good little sister who never causes trouble. The room erupted into chaos. Everyone started talking at once, their voices blending into a chaotic symphony of accusations, guilt trips, and reminders of family duty and obligation. Dad kept reminding me of all they'd done for me over the years. Mom insisted how well they'd raised me. Sarah alternated between guilt trips and outright attacks. I let them rant, their words buzzing in my ears like a fly I was too tired to swat away. Then, when their voices began to lose steam, I spoke, my voice quiet but firm. They're not my children, I said, staring each of them down. I didn't give birth to them. I didn't choose to have them. They're your responsibility, not mine. Especially during the holidays. I'm supposed to be relaxing, too. Sarah, flaring with anger, thought she had the perfect trump card. She stood up, her face flushed with indignation. Well, maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson about gratitude. Let's see how you manage without Mom and Dad paying your college tuition. The room went silent. I watched Mom and Dad exchange uncertain glances, clearly caught off guard by the suggestion. But instead of the panic Sarah expected to see on my face, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. Finally, all the cards were on the table. There was nothing left to hide. I stood up slowly, the weight of their words washing over me, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Actually, Sarah, I began, Grandma's been paying my tuition from Grandpa's education fund. You know, the one he set up for all his granddaughters, the same fund that helped you through nursing school and Emma through business school. I paused, letting that sink in before I dropped the next bombshell. And even if that weren't the case, I have a partial scholarship. Plus, unlike some people, I'm not afraid of working to support myself. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked upstairs. It took me less than 10 minutes to pack. I had gotten very good at traveling light over the years. As I came back down, I could hear Mom and Dad calling after me, their voices a mix of anger and panic. But I was done talking. I walked out the front door, letting it swing closed behind me, their protests falling away as I stepped into the cold winter air. The drive back to campus was strangely peaceful. As the miles stretched between me and home, I methodically blocked their numbers: Mom, Dad, Sarah, Emma. Each tap on my phone screen felt like severing another link in a chain I hadn't even realized was weighing me down. My dorm room, when I finally arrived, was a blessed sanctuary of simplicity. No toys scattered across the floor. No sticky fingerprints on the windows. No constant background noise of children demanding attention. Just my books, my laptop, and the silence of my own thoughts. January passed in a blur: new classes, quiet weekends, and the luxury of my own space. February brought snow, and with it, a blessed lack of family drama. I buried myself in my studies, made plans with friends, and for the first time in years, felt like I was truly living my own life instead of existing in the margins of everyone else's. Then, one cold Saturday morning in late February, I looked out my dorm window and saw them. Mom, Dad, and Emma, standing in the parking lot, looking as uncertain and out of place as I'd ever seen them, among the students rushing to and fro. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home. To hide and let them figure it out on their own. But something about their posture, the way they stood there, made me pause. They looked different, smaller somehow. Less like authority figures, and more like people who had driven 4 hours to try to fix a wrong. I met them in the lobby. Emma spoke first. "Can we buy you coffee? We'd like to talk." The campus cafe was quiet that morning, the soft hum of the machines and the gentle clink of cups filling the air. We sat at a corner table, steam rising from our mugs, and the silence felt heavier than ever. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice tentative. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. "After you left, we had some long conversations. Very long conversations." Emma nodded, meeting my eyes. "Ruby, we were wrong. All of us. We took advantage of you for years and called it family duty to make ourselves feel better about it." Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't realize, or maybe we didn't want to realize, how unfair it was. You deserve your own holidays. Your own time. You deserve to be treated like an adult, not the family babysitter." I took a long sip of my coffee, letting their words sink in. Was it possible? Could they really be this sincere? "What about Sarah?" I asked, the question hanging in the air. Emma sighed. "Sarah, she's still processing. You know how she is. She has trouble admitting when she's wrong. But the rest of us? We want to do better. Things will be different now." Mom looked at me with determination in her eyes. "No more pushing the kids on you. No more expecting you to give up your holidays. We want you to come home because you want to, not because you're needed for childcare." I studied their faces. The sincerity in Mom's eyes. The regret in Dad's expression. The openness in Emma's posture. "Okay," I said finally, my voice soft but steady. "I believe you." That evening, after they'd left, I unblocked their numbers. Within minutes, I had a text from Emma: "Miss you, little sis. For real this time." The following months brought a new normal. I visited home some weekends, and for the first time, it was actually pleasant. When Emma brought her kids, she watched them herself or hired a babysitter. Mom stopped trying to orchestrate family bonding moments that always seem to end with me in charge of a pack of children. Sarah and I still haven't spoken. Sometimes I see her posts on social media, pictures of her boys growing up so fast. Part of me hopes that one day, she'll realize what she did wrong. That she'll reach out first. Until then, I'm at peace with the distance.